Are you ready, Virginia?
Absolutely.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الله وبحمده وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this next episode that is titled Polishing Hearts for Children Worldwide. Today we have a very special guest, someone I actually had the privilege to meet in Abu Dhabi just a couple months ago. Our dear sister Virginia Gray Henry. Welcome. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's such a pleasure to see you again, my dear, after that wonderful conference, and where so many wonderful women from the whole world got together, all of them serving in their particular ways. It was very blessed. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about a very important topic, and you play a huge role when it comes to the children of today and what you're doing worldwide. It's not even just in one city, but vast with all the work that you have been doing. And so I just want to give a little background on your education. Virginia Gray Henry earned a bachelor's degree in arts and art of history and world religion from Sarah Lawrence College. And then she got her master's on education from the University of Michigan. She went on and she also studied 10 years in Al-Assad in Egypt. I've been there, and that's a very fascinating institute. In 1981, she also helped establish the Islamic Texas Society in Cambridge. That's pretty impressive. And her bio just goes very extensive. So we are going to let Virginia actually tell us a little bit more about this bio, because I think it's very important as we dive into today's topic. There's so much happening in our world. And so we understand that children are the future of the world. And that's why your work is so critical and important, Virginia. And so I know you are the director of the Interfaith Publishing House, Quinta. I want you to tell us a little bit more about that project, and then we'll dive into all of the projects you're doing within.
All right. Well, the overview, the bio interview is after I graduated in New York from Sarah Lawrence. I happened to be in the New York Public Library, and my husband-to-be, a Venezuelan, he was looking at books on Islam, and I pulled over Al-Ghazali's spiritual autobiography, the Munqidh min ad-Dalal. And I read it, and I thought, oh my goodness, Islam is true, right? Because we didn't know anything about Islam in the 60s in America, I promise you. So it wasn't even included in world religions. So we wrote a letter to Azhar, and they, not realizing we didn't know any Arabic, they invited us on scholarship. So we sailed over to Morocco, drove all the way to Cairo. The idea was to do the long Hajj, stopped in Libya because Egypt was being bombed by Israel at the time. Our little daughter Hajar was born in Libya. And when she was 2 months old, we just bit the bullet and went into Cairo and then studied there for 10 years. And of course, we were always interested in Imam al-Ghazali because as converts, we really were interested in the inner dimension, not just do this, this, and this. All religions have got fasting and pilgrimage and all the rest, but the opportunity, and Ghazali really made it clear, the subtle level at which you understand what you're being asked to do in terms of how it relates to your own spiritual transformation. So after 10 years in Egypt, and we're still in Egypt, nobody leaves Egypt. My son Mustafa was born there. We moved to England and opened the Islamic Texas Society in Cambridge with the support of some wonderful Muslim families, and began, interestingly enough, publishing among Sira and other things, Al-Ghazali and Abdul Hakim Winter, who now heads the Cambridge Muslim College and built, I think, one of the most beautiful mosques that exist in Cambridge, where, by the way, there is a Ghazali school right now, the Ghazali Children's School. He started with Book 40, the Book of Death, and then the Breaking the Two Desires. So we were beginning Ghazali in Cambridge. And besides doing a master's in curriculum, at that point, I went in and started a doctorate of divinity And then my mother and father became ill here in Kentucky. People might ask, really, Seda, how does a girl from Louisville, Kentucky end up doing Ghazali for the international? It's a good question, and people have the right to wonder, I think. So anyway, so my parents were ill and my children were still in England, and I just came back to Kentucky. And so I helped my parents. I left the Islamic Text Society in the hands of some good Egyptian friends. And then, I mean, where does Fons Vitae come in? So as my father is dying, I did have an invitation to go to Tibet to meet the Tibetan Muslims. They're like American Navajo Indians with their prayer rugs into Lhasa. Then I started publishing the first amazing material that exists on Islam and Tibet. Goodbye, dear. My husband is going out. So then the next thing was then the Bosnian War hit. So then I knew the Bosnian Prime Minister, Haris Salajic, because he'd been studying with us in Libya, where we were stuck for 4 months, wonderfully stuck. So I worked in the Bosnian refugee camps, and that was heartbreaking, and then realized they were dying for Islam and they didn't even practice Islam. So a lot of the books we'd already done, the Life of the Prophet Muhammad that I did with Layla Azam in the 80s, Understanding Islam and the Muslim booklet that I wrote for some Saudi event in Washington, started putting all of these into Bosnian. And then all of a sudden, Abdul Hakim Winter said to me, he said, Aisha, why don't you start another publishing company? Make it certainly Islamic spirituality, but with an interfaith dimension, which will be appropriate for America. So we started Fons Vitae in 1997. And here it is. That's over a quarter of a century ago. We brought out several hundred books. And it's, alhamdulillah, we are a nonprofit educational charity. We work out of the basement and garage of my father's house. I'm here in my office, which is the kitchen. You know, we have no overhead. And then I started, my dear, having grandchildren. All right. There's Layla, who's then 5, and I have 4 grandchildren. And I started to worry because children today are not like we were brought up in the 50s and 60s. They are bombarded with all of this, you know, the iPhones and all the rest of it. And so what to do? How do you introduce Islam to these children? It can't just
I want you to pause there. I want you to pause there because I want to backtrack a little bit. You said a lot of phenomenal things that I think our audience needs to really understand. Your work. I mean, your work is phenomenal, but you said a key word and you said practicing, right? So we know that there's different levels of practicing, especially you and I that actually were guided, were given hidayah by the Almighty to come into this wonderful faith, right? And so a lot of people don't understand even our stories, how we've had to learn from A to Z. When you left, you had absolutely no idea, right? I mean, I'm practically a baby compared to you as far as how long I've been a Muslim. I was introduced to Islam with 9/11. That was really my introduction, you know, many moons after you. But you said something that actually speaks to me as well when you say practicing, right? We need to talk a little bit about that because you're going to go dive into your grandchildren, right? So people need to understand that polishing the hearts of our children also starts at home. And oftentimes we're looking for the outer solutions. But what does that look like for Aisha, for Sister Virginia? How did that look like? I mean, you were living in a Muslim country. You are obviously very visible American, but you're very Muslim as well, right? What does that look like during that era for you and your children in a foreign country?
Well, you know, the Muslims are so wonderful. You know, we are so blessed that we were raised by the Egyptians, right? Because they are so kind and so generous and so flexible and so, what can you say? And we learned the beginning of adab from our Muslim brothers and sisters who took care of us, who taught us everything. You know, of course we were studying. And in those days, my sister, in Egypt in the 70s, 60s and 70s, there were young people coming in from Japan, from France, from Italy, from England, a whole group of us. And by the way, we all know each other now. We're all working together. And we all went there in order to understand Islam, as you say, as it's practiced. And what you discover is that the Sunnah that we're all imitating, what the Sunnah is really about is putting the other person first. The reason we don't argue is that's putting ourselves first. The reason we're not angry, that's putting ourselves first. And you start looking at all the different things we are asked to do, and all of them is really in the imitation of the Blessed Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And so when, I meet a Muslim, let's say we finally visited the Muslims, we worked on films, we were filmmakers, we visited the Muslims in Taipei and Indonesia and all. And of course, we felt at home everywhere because everyone is copying the same model. So you fit right in, And so I think, originally I was so surprised to hear Muslims saying Alhamdulillah all the time, like for everything. Some people said it like every 5 minutes, and some people were saying it when a tragedy struck. And then the whole learning of what are they really saying with Alhamdulillah. And during my life, I've had major illnesses. I was paralyzed with Guillain-Barré for a year and couldn't even chew. And I learned that Alhamdulillah is we're saying every moment, whether it's a difficulty or a blessing, is an opportunity from Allah to purify. Every moment is a moment to trust his divine will and to love what he brings us. So I'm paralyzed. Alhamdulillah, I love his will. And so often people fall down when the trials come, but they don't realize that his will is perfect. But imagine getting to learn this by being in the company of the beautiful Muslims throughout our beautiful Muslim world. To be given a key to peace in our hearts. It's a big process, and it's not overnight, and everybody has their own path and their own degrees, and sometimes they can't get to a practice just yet in their life, but it comes when it's supposed to come. So we never judge, So
absolutely. You hit it right on. And I think one of the key aspects of it at the very beginning is that whole aspect of knowledge, right? We need to make sure that we are in the company, and it doesn't necessarily need to be text knowledge. In the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was the companions. It was sitting around them, like you said, good mannerisms, right? Yes. Good adab. That speaks volumes, and that's how they used to learn, and that's what we need to be doing from each other. Just listening to you, it really expands my chest, because I wish when I came into the faith that I met people like you, and I didn't meet always like nice, well-mannered individuals. I unfortunately went through all kinds of individuals. Some of them were very harsh, and it was like, okay, what did I get myself into? And it wasn't until I started educating myself. I'm currently doing my master's to become a chaplain here in the U.S. Wonderful. And the education is vast, right? We are always going to be students of knowledge. And so I appreciate that you're talking so vast about how the Muslims are supposed to be and what Alhamdulillah really represents.
What you're saying also is that it's a state of being. And I didn't know this until when I was paralyzed and I couldn't move. And they thought it was forever. And when it first happened, I thought, if I live, what will I do with the rest of my life? Because I couldn't move, right? And I'm very active. Then I thought, no, the people I love most, I don't love them for what they do. They're writers, they're authors. I love them for their presences. And I went to a great doctor, Dr. Zahir Abdin, an Egyptian doctor, who was always old, all the years I knew her, and always a bit bent. And she went out at dawn and came back at midnight, and she changed. But the thing about her, never mind her doctoring throughout Egypt and the rest of the world, she was just always luminous. She was always smiling. She never said anything that wasn't beautiful. And as I was lying there, I thought, if I could be like her, I would be doing more than if all the good works, all the charity. Now, what was I loving? I was loving her golden heart, the light of her heart. Now, this is what the true Sunnah gets to be, because Now, this is quite a powerful thing I have to tell you right now. This is finally at my age to finally discover what Islam is, because it's an ongoing process. And I have a Muslim sister, and her daughter was born with spina bifida. And spina bifida was a terrible disease. It was so bad that in the end, her husband couldn't bear it and he left. And she's a teacher in college and a translator of tafsir. And she told me every day, my daughter in the school, about twice a week, a phone call would come from the school and say, we're sorry to tell you, your daughter has had a seizure. She's peed on herself. Come and get her. And so my friend said, Aisha, what happened was every time the phone rang, she said, I thought, oh no, not again. She said, would the Prophet Muhammad ever have thought, oh no, not again, or Sayyidina Isa or any of them? If you think, oh no, not again, you're putting your personal moment of ease and convenience at the expense of need. So the real golden heart, the real thing we're trying to reach to is to reach that state in ourselves where we don't think, oh no, not again. We say everything that comes, Ya Rab, yes. Something difficult, a horrible news, an earthquake. And so the difficulty is, how do I get from my putting myself first at every level to being the true sunnah? And the true sunnah, like Dr. Zahir Abdeen, is there was nothing left of her desires and her wants and her preferences, my personal convenience. It was all of that is she had reached by practicing the sunnah, imitating the prophet, the golden heart. There was nothing there except nur shining out. And that is what the children's series is about, telling the children from the beginning, your true nature, your fitra is the golden heart. Ghazali describes it as that, which is only radiance and luminosity. So the importance of telling the children from the beginning of their lives, this is who you are. Letting them, think how many children think they're worthless, or they take the opinion of someone on the internet or someone saying something mean at school. And the whole issue today is misidentification, not identifying with the true prophetic essence that
absolutely
golden heart.
And that's why, and that's why your work with the Al Ghazali's project, which you're going to dive a little bit more into. But prior to that, you're going to talk to us, how did that begin with those grandchildren that were coming? I know for me, as a single mom, I was raising a little boy when I converted. And I remember the first time I read that Al Ghazali's mom used to leave him at the masjid when he was 5 years old. And I did that, and I was
wow.
Fantastic I did that.
Idea.
And so I'm very fascinated to hear all of this work that you're doing, because like I said, when I converted, I was a single mother and I raised my son. He just turned 18 this past Sunday. And so to see the fruits, because that's really what you see at the end of the day, right? To see that his prayer is on point. He doesn't miss his sunnah prayers. He's very caring, very loving.
Mashallah.
Never discouraged him when he wanted to fast at 5, right? His fasting ended at 10 a.m., but that was still fasting for him. And so these are things that I think a lot of parents shy away or listen. Like you said, there's a lot of noise outside, and there's a lot of noise, not only with social media, but with sometimes influence that say, oh, that's so cruel. Why would you do that? Or why are you going to do B, A, and C? Forgetting that this is just a temporary life and we have more after here. But let's backtrack and let's learn about how this project came about, especially with your grandkids. And then we want to dive into the actual project and everything you're doing, the type of learning that you're doing. You just were telling me off camera that you were doing something wonderful this past weekend. So I want to hear all about it. And I'm sure our audience is eager to learn about it. So let's start there with your grandkids.
All right. So, of course, I raised my own children. They grew up in Cairo. And then when we moved to England to do the Tech Society, most of our friends were Muslim. But in America, that's not true. You're lucky you live in Texas within a greater community, but I don't have that here. And my daughter lives in Oxford, and my son lives in Germany. They wouldn't have that either, right? So what do you do if you don't live with a tight community of perfect Muslim neighbors and a grandmother, right? So I started worrying about my grandchildren. And at the same time, I had a call one dawn from Hamza Yusuf. It was during Ramadan. And he said, Aisha, my children go to an Islamic school, but it's not really working out. And what about Ghazali for children? And, it just went to my heart because we'd been publishing Ghazali bit by bit by bit. And we nearly, by the way, we started the 40 books. We're using the Darul Minhaj Critical Edition, which was brought out by Saudi Arabia. And all of the 40 books of the whole Ihya Ulumuddin, there are like 11 to go, and we have them all under translation now, and they just need to be edited. And this is very exciting. So the Ghazali Project for Children will continue, because the thing about Ghazali, and Abdul Hakim Winter told us this, he said, the Ihya Ulumuddin is like the Quran in a usable order. It starts right at the beginning, what is knowledge, and goes to death, and goes through everything and puts back the inner transformative meanings. And so it's not you're just being told not to argue, right? Don't argue, that's bad. If someone tells you that, you hear it, but it doesn't do anything for you. But then if you break it down as Ghazali does, what are you doing when you're arguing? You're basically saying, I'm right, you're wrong, you're ignorant, right? And the energy, you are trying to overpower the other. Whoa. And so you're strengthening the nafs al-amara. You see what I mean? But if the children understand, yeah, that's what I'm doing, that's horrible. You see, he goes into things and opens them out in a way in which you think, I'd rather be dead than be doing that. So that is what he does with the Ihya Ulumuddin. And so anyway, we have this big project, and back to the grandchildren. So I thought, yes, but I mean, that's really hard. Think of what this will take. We will have to start with the Book of Knowledge, which contains the 40 in essence. Book of Belief, and then start going through wudu and prayer and fasting and charity and the whole thing, and Hajj. So imagine you're sitting there, you're a mother, and I'm a mother, grandmother. First, you've got to get those 7 books translated by scholars who understand the inner life into English. And those have to be edited high level. And then I have to take those manuscripts while they're being edited, the English, and slowly read it. And it's hard, right? Circle every key idea, circle some of the supportive scripture. You can't put all of the hadith and all of the Quran that Ghazali uses, because then you'd be back to having something that's unmanageable. And then to actually put that into a story form that would interest and excite a child and inform, and then have to get curriculum experts and design workbooks and a full school curriculum. Never mind, get the artwork done. Can you imagine doing something like that? I mean, wow. It's unbelievable. And I had to get a grant. Hamza Yusuf turned me on to Templeton to bring out these books. We're sick and tired of the children's book looking ridiculous, crummy. Children, we are based on Al-Kitab. So our books must be elegant for children. They must feel our books are beautiful too, not all those other cool books you get at bookstores for children, which talk about nothing. So Hamza Yusuf encouraged me to try to get a grant from the Templeton. It took me 1 year sitting in this chair in my nightgown, writing that grant, and we got $750,000 and had to raise another $500,000. Imagine the energy. But I'm going to say something to you, Seda. This nearly makes me cry. For 3 years, I had 3 years to bring out books 1 through 6. And it had to be on a schedule. And I had to report to Templeton every 3 months. I've achieved this. So I basically didn't dress for 3 years, never went out for lunch. If we went on vacation, I stayed in the hotel room all day and came out for dinner. And I'm thinking now, looking back, like as a person, I don't actually have that kind of discipline. There was something in it, this project, that it was going through me. I take no credit for it and no ownership, by the way. I can't take any credit because guess what? It was never mine and I didn't do it. I didn't even put my name on the books because I didn't do it. And where did I learn what this really is? When I came to do the book of Zakat of Imam al-Ghazali, I was really thinking, oh, this is going to be boring because at Azhar, we got the laws, a mudda of grain, blah, blah. I thought, children's Zakat. It changed my whole life because even I learned something more about humility. If I told you or myself, be humble right now. How do I be humble? Well, listen to this. So this is what's really going on. This is so powerful, is that Imam al-Ghazali, I'm going to just get rid of this phone. Just turn it off, actually. All right. So I start the Zakat book with a group of children. Now, this story is for you adults, okay? It's going to come over much easier in the children's story than reading this really hard material. All right. So Ghazali, it opens with some children, and they're on a merry-go-round in the town square. And they're noticing, oh, some of these children here who are looking longingly, they don't have the wherewithal to ride on the merry-go-round, and they're looking a little bit shabby. So then what happens is they decide, I'll just let it ring. It's easier. I'm just going to take it. Sorry. Excuse me. Could you call back in an hour, please? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so they realize those children, and they're on the way, the children, these are the children that goes through the series, to the secret magic garden where Hajj Abdullah is meeting them, and he answers their questions. So coming into the magical door with plants hanging down, they suddenly see a beggar, and he's saying, Lillah, Lillah. So they rush into Hajj Abdullah, and they say, Hajj Abdullah, oh, this is just terrible. Hajj Abdullah, why are some people rich and some people poor? Great question. We all ask it. When do we not think that as children? Seeing the great distance of people you may see on the street or homeless. So then Hajj Abdullah says, and they said, and there's someone saying, Lillah. Hajj Abdullah says, take this bit of money because you never disappoint someone who reaches out. And that's in any way, right? Someone who's sad. And he said, and by the way, li means for the sake of Allah, for God, but it also means li, it already belongs to Allah. We say, inna lillahi, surely we belong to God, and surely the returning is unto him. So the children come back and he says, let's say he's talking to you and me. And he says, now, my dears, did either you or me, did we give ourselves our parents? Did we choose them? Did we give ourselves our place in time and space? Our station? Did you and I give ourselves our skills, our aptitudes, our connections? We, in fact, have given ourselves nothing. So we can't take credit for anything. You can say, yes, but I persevere. You didn't even give yourself the type of person who perseveres. So since he said, everything you and I are, and therefore have, is on loan. It's a loan, it's a trust. So none of us have everything. How can we be proud if we didn't do any of it? Me sitting in front of this computer for 3 or 4 years, I didn't do it. That was the loan returning itself. Do you see what I'm saying? So then Ghazali says this amazing thing, and this will change you, how we actually shouldn't give and should give. And so what he does is he tells a story. And by the way, Ghazali's stories, the stories he tells within his work, those stories turn up in Rumi. Everybody who came after, they all pick up on the stories. You keep reading them. He said, once upon a time, there was a king, meaning Allah. And he said to this rich man, these people are hungry in the town, take them food. And the rich man said, look, these are our lands. We till them. They've been in the family. All right, I'll take the food. Now he goes and holds the plate of food up high. So the poor people are reaching up. They feel less. They feel less and lower. And they're also worrying, are we now beholden to him? Next time he comes to town, will we have to take care of his horse for the day? Wrong way to give. Now here's how to give. And this, sister, it makes me cry. This is so powerful. The next story is the king goes to a young man who was an orphan adopted by a family of means, and they have taught him finance. And the king says, there is a widow in town. She needs to educate her children. Take her money. So he goes and he takes a plate of gold and he lowers it. And he looks up to her face and he says, and this is the way we should all give. Even thinking this, he says, oh, blessed lady, I beg you to receive what I bring on behalf of the king in order, not in order that you educate you, in order that I may give back some of what is on loan to me. Now, what we have to do when we give to a homeless is be grateful to them that they provide us an opportunity to give back. Look at the lives we live. And even when Ghazali is talking about, I'm doing zakat with a bunch of children now, that when we give our zakat, we should feel shame that we're not giving more. It makes me cry because I'm seeing what I'm doing and how much I have actually left. I feel shameful. So Imam al-Ghazali, as you can see what he does, he actually gives you through these stories of kings and things, the wherewithal to really have a look at yourself. So
yeah, it's very enticing, not only for adults. I'm memorized here. I am fascinated by the story, but I am also picturing what that looks like for little kids, right? It's understandable. It's almost like the Prophet, peace be upon him. He used to talk to a 7-year-old and a 7-year-old and, full attention, and was able to communicate that emotional intelligence that we lack today, right? And so these stories, the way you're even presenting them, like, mashallah, it's just so memorizing. And
the children are much smarter than we think, and they're bored.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're bored with the way we present everything. For example, the newest book that's come in since those 7 is called Al-Ghazali's book 26, The Bane of the Tongue. All right. So I gave a talk to these little children last weekend online. And I said, you can't fast from food and water, but there's the next fast, the fast of the elect, not the elect of the elect, for the prophets and the anbiya, those people who fasted from every thought except God. But the layer under that is where you fast from all of your different limbs, what you look at, what you listen to, where your feet take you, what you do. But it is the fast of the tongue. So I have all these little children in this class. I'm in there from ages like 5 to 11 or whatever it is. So I said, now I'm going to give you an assignment. I'm going to take 7 things you can't do with your tongue, and I want you to write them all down. So I said, for example, starting with even your tone. Say mother says, come help me in the kitchen. You can say, all right. Or you can say, yes, mother. That's already okay. Then, and of course, Ghazali explains the tongue, the little tiny delicate organ. This can do more harm than a sledgehammer, and its reach is to the end of the world. Look at the internet. You can, with a slip of the tongue, destroy someone. He says you're not just harming others, you're destroying your golden heart, right? You're wrecking it. And then he goes into things like, oh, well, of course, children tease each other and mimic and things like this and argue. And of course, arguing, again, is a terrible thing to do because, again, you are putting yourself first. So he goes through all of these things. And then when he ends with backbiting, there are 20 of them, but I just took the ones that affect children mostly, like a little lie here and there. Like I tell another one that's scary that I have suffered from, that I've been bad about, is sometimes a friend confides you, I'm going through such and such. This is what I'm enduring. They're sharing a secret with you, what they're going through. If you share that with anyone else, like so-and-so is going through this with their mother, whoa, you have broken a sacred trust. And children do it, we all do it. And then it came to the one, of course, we all know how horrendous backbiting is, to the point that in the Kitab al-Siyam Som of Ghazali, he puts in the hadith, a sahih, where the 2 old ladies are fasting in Ramadan, and they send a message to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and they say, we're old and frail. May we break our fast. And he sent back a bowl and he said, you already did break your fast. I want you to throw up in this bowl, and to the horrified onlookers, pieces of flesh and blood. He said, we know from the Quran, if you backbite, it is the same as eating the dead flesh of someone. And for the Quran to have an image, and I was telling the children, it's that horrible. It must be, he's trying to tell, the Quran is trying to tell us, my God, look what it really is. You don't want to do this. But then Ghazali goes in to say, well, it's not just that we backbite, talking to people, about people. And look at the Muslim world. He's going to hell. That imam is no good. She dresses badly. The Muslims never stop backbiting. We should shut up and be still, because Ghazali says silence is so important that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu kept pebbles in his mouth, so that he had to take time to think, should I take them out? Is it worth saying? Was it going to be nice what I said? To the point that one of the assignments I've given the children is to get raisins and for half a day, keep them in their mouth. So they have to take them out in order to speak, so they can observe. Was what I was going to say nice? Was it worth saying? So that's one of the activities the children are doing. So he says, Ghazali says, the backbiting is not just what you say out loud. He said, we are always inside. We have our golden heart, our true, innate, beautiful fitra that are saying to ourselves all the time, why did you do that? You better do that. That wasn't kind. And then we have the nafs al-amara. He said, the nafs al-amara is talking all the time, and it gossips. It suddenly says, oh gosh, look at how she looked at that event, right? Oh, gracious. You know, what a stupid that little boy is. So I said to these children, right? So you also have to watch that horrible inner gossip you're doing all the time, inner backbiting. Now, a 10-year-old girl was so impressed. She got back in touch with me and she said, I understand all of them, but you know what I've discovered? I actually, and I think everybody is doing the inner backbiting all the time. She said, sometimes I look at the homeless people and I look down on them. Sometimes I look at people and I think, oh, they're really poor. Sometimes I look at my friends and I think, how could they have an outfit so horrible? She said, we are doing it all the time. This is a 10-year-old girl picks up on the most subtle thing that we're all doing. And so she is going to keep her notebook for the rest of Ramadan and write all the times she caught herself doing that. Because if we can get children at the beginning of their lives and their parents learning with them at the same time to actually observe ourselves and put a stop to it. And the bane of the tongue, you know, to think that there are 20 things we are doing nonstop. And by being aware of them, Ghazali makes us aware of that level. It means we have something we're doing all the time. All the time, I'm talking every day. Look at me talking so much right now. And Ghazali points out, maybe sometime you tell about something, a trip the family made to Disneyland, right? And you didn't just tell about it. You said it in such a way that you're bragging and showing off. And what are you creating? Envy in the other children. Think how often we're boasting and when we're talking. So what Ghazali does is gives us tools, a tool that we've got right this minute, all day long, the next person that comes into the room. And wallahi, my sister, since I've read this book and I'm working on it and making it for children now, I'm really watching myself, and I don't think I backbite anymore, you know, because I'm so scared of it, you know. But I mean, the other things, am I boasting, you know? So that's why Ghazali is so important for children and their parents. And this series is not just for kids, it's for their mothers and fathers. And Ghazali ends the Book of Knowledge it's called, this is the 40th chapter in the main book, the overview book. It's called Being a Teacher. He said, we are all teachers. Everything we do is showing someone else how to do it. So whatever we're doing, we should think to ourselves, would I like somebody imitating me? Because we're all imitating other people that we see. I used to see how a lady put on her lipsticks. I started imitating that, right? That's as silly as that. So we actually are copying each other, and you should be thinking every moment, parents and children, would I like this copied? I mean, good night, the encouragement we are all being given to actually perform our Islam with depth. And Al-Ghazali, I mean, Islam was only 400 years old when he wrote the Ihya Ulumuddin, because within the first 400 years, people started doing the outward without the inward.
No, this is very true. You know, what you said, it is for everyone. And I do appreciate that you highlighted that, because it always, like I mentioned earlier, it starts at home. You know, I remember when I put my son in kindergarten in Islamic school, and we think that the Islamic school or these institutions are going to raise our children. But lo and behold, it starts at home. It starts with our mannerism. It starts with our practice. And they're little mirrors, right? So like you're saying, they imitate, they learn really quickly, and they're little sponges, very smart little sponges.
They hear everything.
Hear, see, and what have you. So our time is coming to an end. This conversation could go on for another 2 hours for me. It's really been fascinating. Is there anything you need us to learn? Where can we find you? I know there was another one that I read about in your bio about fasting for children. And this is what you're talking about, the whole fasting of the eyes, the fasting of. So this is very impressive. Any last words for our audience? We are entering half of Ramadan. Ramadan is almost, we're in the half point on 15th day. It just flew. SubhanAllah, I feel like I was celebrating last Ramadan, then this Ramadan, and now we're in the middle. What advice would you give to these parents that are watching, anyone that is watching today that perhaps has not had the opportunity like yourself? Where can they begin?
Well, honestly, they would do so well to get the books and begin the process. They'll have so much fun, whether they do it on Sundays with a group of neighborhood children or they do it as bedtime stories, but they've got the workbook and the activities. Even one of the things, like I can remember right here by my desk, Medina and Bilal were 3 and 5, and they were lying. I have the children draw their heart. This is something you can get your children to do. Because, if I have a lot of things to do and make a list, I can see them and check them off. But if you're just supposed to be good, it's kind of vague and abstract. So I have all children draw their heart and they put dots of something they want to correct. And I can remember listening to Bilal saying, this is for not minding mommy. This is for being so noisy. Kids know it all, and so not only do they draw their hearts, but then they can see it. It's out there in front of them, and they know they know exactly what they're doing. So I'm happy to do any session with parents. When a book came out in Indonesian, the series is now in 16 languages, including Russian, Uzbek. But the Indonesian, I got together with 200 Indonesian families on Zoom, and they just ask questions. But we're happy to send to any one of the viewers a whole selection of videos and other things which can help them understand the project, because it's going worldwide. And why is it going worldwide? Because Muslims, just like me, they just need the satisfaction of understanding the deeper reasons they're being asked to do things in a way that it's clear and beautiful. And you could put up my email or the Fons Vitae address or something. Or we're happy to help you receive the books. And we are a giant global family, and it's wonderful to see the Muslims arming themselves and arming their children against all of this trash that's getting worse and worse.
Yep. So we're one ummah, right? Like when I say I'm Mexican, but how can you be Muslim? Anyone can be Muslim. And so we are one big family that practice one Islam. So
who would think from Kentucky comes Muhammad Ali Clay and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Ghazali?
Right? Yeah, no, this was fascinating. Sister Aisha, Virginia, Gray Henry here with us from Kentucky. Yes, we want to thank you for your time, for your expertise, for this great work. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you and reward you and continue to give you good health. And may the rest of your Ramadan be very beneficial for you and your family. Again, we want to thank you for always being so accessible to us. We will definitely put the information for everyone to get a hold of these books. It's very important for us to actually do our part. And you've done all of the work. Now it's us to put it out there.
I didn't do it. It's a privilege and an honor to be with you, my blessed Mexican sister.
No, we want to thank our audience for taking the time and watching this. Please do share it out, and we will be sharing our beloved sister's information so you can get a hold of her. Again, we want to thank you for your time. Have a blessed Ramadan, blessed Eid. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fast, your prayers, your du'as, and your charity. My name is Nahala Morales, and I'm coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, blessed family.
I think we're done.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think that was great. And you actually got out of me some stuff I would normally not have said, but it just was exciting to be able to share this at another level, you know?
Well, I'm glad. This was a really good interview. I actually might come and bring you to our platform as well. So I'll be in touch with you. I think the reverts need to also hear this. And we have all kinds of ages in terms of reverts, from 1 day to 20, 30 years. So
actually they need it. They need this angle on it. Otherwise, I had one of our reverts just said, I was just standing doing the prayers mechanically, and there wasn't anything in it. If he did the Ghazali on prayer and realized in every position, every phrase, there is levels of stuff, it would change it would give them prayer, and they need get them the purification and prayer books. Please do it.
Absolutely. I will definitely be in touch. I will be in touch with you, but I want to thank you for this session, and we'll be in touch, inshallah. Take care.
Lots of love. Assalamu alaikum, my sister.
Walaikum salam.
Recording stopped.